How y'all doing? CJ Moto here. Let's look at this M17 radio. I'm pumped. I got my cowboy hat on here because I'm heading to RC Pro in Oklahoma this weekend at Boot Hill Raceway, so I hope to see you there. Anyhow, let's take a look at this here M17 and some of the settings that are going to make you faster at the track. Be a little walkthrough of the screen here on the Sanwa M17 and some of the adjustments that I like to make for the races. So let's go in here. So hopefully this doesn't get too bright on us, but basically you want to spend a lot of time here in your settings, and once you get in here to the settings, you got some things here under your steering, and up here in the top right corner right here on this button you can toggle through steering, throttle, A1, A2. You really never use A1 or A2, but so on your steering you got your dual rate. I don't mess with that at all. You got your steering speed. I turn that down to anywhere between -30 and -40 with the MKS 599 servo. So if you have a super fast servo, go ahead and crank that sucker down a little bit. It'll definitely make you faster on the track, or at least give it a try. Now your curve. Your curve is how hard the steering is around center to midpoint. So you could turn your curve to a little bit of negative. On Sanwa, you want it to be a negative curve. If you want to deaden the center a little bit or make it a little smoother around the center. I wouldn't say deaden at all, but just make it smoother around the center. Anywhere between 10% to -35 or 40 is probably going to be your area there. If you go too much more than that, then it's gonna eventually have to catch up with itself. So you can see there, it's lighter there as you're steering, and then it starts to pick back up. If you make it too much of a negative curve, it's gonna really ramp up in the middle of the movement, and it's gonna be funky. And then FS, I don't mess with that at all. Base, that's your endpoint adjustments. That's super important. That's how far your wheels turn. So you only want the wheels to turn as far as until your steering screws lock out. So you want to crank that down to like an 80% for your endpoints left and right, and then slowly ramp it up until you hear the servo binding. And as soon as you hear it binding, back it off a click or two. That's what you want to do with your endpoints. And then obviously your sub trim, you don't ever want to have any trim in your radio if possible. So if you see, if I trim right and trim left, I'm right at 0. Same with throttle, because all my trims are set in my sub trim menu. So yeah, don't do your trims on the radio, do them in the sub trims if at all possible. And if you have a good servo, they should stay pretty well put. I don't mess with that. And then the feeling, that's how reactive it is. So 7S on the feeling means it's the most peppy. If you turn your feeling down, it's going to make everything feel a little bit less aggressive. I keep throttle and steering at 7S. I just basically turn my feelings down with the speed. But I do highly advise you to try to mess with your steering speed, especially if you're a new driver. A lot of these servos just have way too much speed. Now if we toggle over to throttle, you got 100% rate. So that means that I have 100% of throttle. I like to have 100%. I'll change my gearing on the car. I won't turn my throttle down in the I won't turn my throttle down in the radio. I'll turn that down through the ESC and also just through the gearing in the car. I like to have 100% of the available throttle. And then your rate B, that's how much braking. So right now I have the braking on this truggy here. I have the braking set at 88%. And then we can scroll down. Speed, I keep the speed turned all the way up for throttle, but you could also mess with turning the speed down on throttle. If you're not getting traction, you want more traction, turn your forward speed down a little bit, and it'll allow it to not spin as much when you hit the gas if you have a happy trigger finger, like a lot of us do. Curve, you hit the forward button, you hit the throttle on your trigger here, you hit your throttle and you have your positive curve. So I have a -18% curve in my throttle. So once again, a little bit more dead around the beginning, and then it ramps up. I don't like to go too severe with this. And then brake curve, I'm going to try this weekend a -20% brake curve. So it'll just allow me to really be very precise these running these negative curves allows you to be very precise right around the beginning of the movement. So if you give it just a little bit of brake, it's going to be even less than it would have been before when you're running the negative. If you run a positive curve on a Sanwa, then you're going to hit the brakes a little bit and you're going to have more than you normally would. So that'd be a rare thing that you would need that, especially with Tekin electronics. So yeah, that's basically, I'm going to do a kind of a video series on the Sanwa M17, but that's basically, if you get in here and you want to mess with, you can do anti-lock brakes. I don't mess with that, but you can get in here and do anti-lock brakes. You can turn that on. It'll actually pulsate your brakes like the anti-lock brakes of a car. I mean, it's kind of cool. I'm sure some people use it. I'm sure it works quite well, but I don't mess with that at all. I just like it to be like a consistent feel, not with any of that anti-lock braking going on. So that's basically everything really in your settings for your radio. It's not super complicated, but all that stuff I just showed you, if you mess with that and you learn how to use it, it's going to make you a much more effective driver. And don't be afraid to mess with that stuff. That's one of the single most important things to mess with in RC racing, is the settings in your radio. So yeah, Sanwa M17, it's been really good to me thus far. I would highly recommend this radio. Super easy to set up and just really cool. And it also has this little feature. If you turn this knob right here, hang on, let me go back. You turn this knob and it has, like, if you're like a doctor and you want to go in here and make sure all your stuff's working, you got 100% throttle, 100% brake, 100% steering, 100% steering. So that just kind of allows you to know that you're getting your full throws in the radio. So that's kind of actually a neat screen right there. Once again, that's just by moving this little knob. Anyhow, I hope you all learned something from that video. And I hope you have an awesome weekend and get to go to the races. CJ Moto out. So this is what full brakes look like. 100%. I was just testing out some driveline components. But yeah, way too much for a dirt track. Hope y'all enjoyed that video. Please like, share, and subscribe. CJ Moto out.